Thank you for joining us on FRC Media. I'm Keith Tebow. We're talking to a lot of candidates and those who represent the ballot questions on November 8th, the opponents and proponents, to get you better prepared to vote as you go to the state election later on this fall. Right now, we're going to focus on one of those referendum questions. Question one. Question one is actually an amendment to the state constitution, which calls for a 4% tax on those making an income of over $1 million a year. And today we're going to focus on the yes on question one. I'm pleased to be joined by Dax Crocker. He's a public school teacher here in Fall River, and he's also here representing the Coalition for Social Justice in support of question one. Dax, thanks for joining me. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Let me ask you, first of all, there's a lot to this that I want to try to, touch upon as we speak. But, in general, why was this an important thing to ask the voters to consider a tax on those making over $1 million a year?
Well, it's important for two reasons, in my opinion. Number one, we can't raise taxes because the Constitution of Massachusetts doesn't allow it. Everybody has to pay the same rate according to the Constitution at this point. And I think that back in the day, that was something that people could live with because we didn't have billionaires and multimillionaires. But nowadays, we have a lot of people that are making lots of money, and the fair share of that tax is not being paid. Of that money is not being paid in taxes. And so that's why we call it the Fair Share Amendment, because I think people should pay their fair share. If you make over $1 million, you could pitch in a little more so that people can go to college, can go to public schools. They are properly funded. People can go to work without having to get a loan just to get a $15 an hour job so that they can buy a car so they can go to work. Those are things that will benefit everybody. So that's why it's important.
Let me ask you, you talked about how it is targeted, right? The money won't just go anywhere. According to the amendment, it must be spent on public education, K through 12, higher education, and also infrastructure, roads and bridges, and public transportation. Is that important for people to understand? Because some people may say, well, the state gets extra money and they can just spend it anywhere they want. They really can't here, correct?
That is correct. It's a constitutional amendment. So we're not passing a law. We're not passing a referendum. We are amending the Constitution, which is a big deal, right? The constitutions are not meant to be amended, whenever we feel like it. This is a priority, and a lot of people think that this should be done, and we're going to do it. We're going to pass it in November. Everybody's going to benefit. Number one, which is the priority for a lot of people, is back in the day, people used to go to college, and the government, state and federal, including FAFSA, would cover 80% of the tuition cost. 80% of going to college was covered by the government. People would pay something between 10 and 20%. That in a generation has gone upside down. The government pays 20% and people are paying 80%. Now, obviously, most people don't have out-of-pocket money to pay 80% of the cost of going to college. So what do? They get into debt. They mortgage their future with $50,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 loan, student loan debt that ends up affecting not just the person that took the loan and their families, but it ends up affecting the people who have the money, the people who are business owners, because they have to inflate salaries so that people can pay back the student loan. So this is going to benefit the business owner and the employee so that people don't have to get a huge salary so that they can pay back a $100,000 loan.
Yeah. And in many ways, and you just touched upon it a little bit, I want you to expound upon it. For cities like a Fall River and a New Bedford, gateway cities across the Commonwealth, as well as larger cities like Boston and Worcester and Springfield, this is a social justice and equity issue as well, correct?
That is correct. I have a colleague here at the Coalition for Social Justice who had to pass on an admissions to Bridgewater University, because guess what? She couldn't make it to college on public transportation. It was impossible for her to go take her classes at Bridgewater from Fall River unless she got into another debt to buy a car so that she can go to college. It shouldn't be like that. Buying a car or getting into a auto loan should be an option, not forcing people into it so that they can go to work or they can go to school. I have a friend in New Bedford, Massachusetts, who works at the business park in New Bedford. He lives in New Bedford, works in New Bedford. I gave him a ride about maybe a year, 2 years ago, because he had to take an Uber from New Bedford, where he lives, to the business park in the north side of New Bedford so he could go to work, because there wasn't a bus that could take him to work within the same city, never mind going to work in Boston. So this is not something that should be happening in the United States of America in the year 2022. Come on.
Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about what the opponents of this measure are asking, are saying in asking people to vote no, and I want you to respond. A lot of what they're saying is, you know, that it really is a middle class tax cut in many instances, in that, many people who are working day in, day out, they may be struggling. They're able to save money. They may able to sell a home in the future. They may have a small business which they may happen to sell, and they may fall in this area where they may make more than $1 million in a given year, and that it's not fair to them because they've worked hard for that money. They're not the uber rich. They're just middle class people, and they may happen to have a windfall and fall under this amendment. How do you respond to that?
Number one, the $1 million threshold is on the net income, which I understand some people may end up falling there for whatever reason. But this is after people can take all their write-offs, all their deductions. If it comes from a small business income in which you, the person, is the business, right? You can write off everything you are allowed to by the law, and then the net is the one that will pay the extra 4%, not the first $1 million, but anything over $1 million is going to pay 4 pennies. 4 pennies is all we're asking you. 4 pennies for every dollar that you make over $1 million, so that you end up getting the benefit in our society of having people who can go to college and now come out with a huge loan, so that people who are working class can buy a home that it's literally out of reach for many, many families right now. It's going to end up benefiting the economy as a whole.
Yeah. Let me ask you, the opponents are also saying that, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts over the last few years has seen a large influx in state revenue. They're giving back almost $3 billion this year. And that, this really isn't needed. There's enough money to make further investments in education and in higher ed and in infrastructure. How do you respond to that? Is this sort of like bad timing for this in some ways, because the state is getting a lot of money over the past few years?
Well, we don't know what's going to happen next year. We don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. We don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. We can't be changing the Constitution every time we feel like this is not working out. We are looking at not the next 24 months. We're making a decision for a generation. We are making a decision for everybody who is just coming out of high school right now and will end up spending the next 5, 10, 15 years of their lives in school to make our society better. So I would ask those who are considering whether the state has too much money right now, the question is, do we know the future? We want to make a decision today that will affect an entire generation. It's the same thing as 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when the government was paying 80% of tuition, people say, oh, it's just, for another year, people can pitch in a little more, people can pitch in a little more, and people can pitch in a little more. And it went down from 80% to 20%. They made a decision for an entire generation. We are making a decision for our children and the next generation that's coming right behind us.
Yeah. Let me ask you, as we move forward, I want to give you the opportunity as we wrap up here to sort of take control of our little interview here and speak directly to the voters of Fall River on one, where they can find more information if they have some other questions about the Fair Share Amendment in question one, and two, why they should consider voting yes on November 8th.
I will ask the voters in Fall River and the entire south coast of Massachusetts to weigh the options of continuing to force our bright students who want to graduate from high school, go to college, get a bachelor's, get a master's degree, get a PhD, and we as a society forcing them to mortgage their entire future, their entire potential, financial and economic potential, just to get a degree and serve us better. I think we are better than that. I think that the voters of the south coast of Massachusetts should say to our bright potential, future to be doctors and lawyers and nurses and teachers. I am a public school teacher in Fall River, Massachusetts. And we should say to them, we believe in you and we want to do everything that we can so that when you get out of school and come back to serve us with all the degrees that you're going to get, you can buy your house, you can buy your car, you can live free, you are not stressed with having to pay a $200,000 loan because you decided to get a master's degree to become a nurse. No, we are better than that. Let's give the future generation that's coming right behind us the opportunity to graduate from school and serve us without having a huge loan over their shoulders.
All right. Dax Crocker, a public school teacher here in Fall River and also representative the Coalition for Social Justice, asking people to vote yes on question one. Thank you for joining me. All the best, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here on FRC Media. And please make a point to vote before November 8th.